Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory high.
I grew up outside of Troy, Alabama, about 50 miles from Montgomery. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. My father had saved $300, and with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. We grew up very poor. I had 6 brothers, 3 sisters, wonderful mother, wonderful father. They worked very hard.
John Lewis grew up on that farm, a farm where everyone had to work. Work was survival, a necessity. But that Alabama farm boy wanted more. He was driven to get an education.
Sometimes on the farm, the work was so continuous, his parents recognized the benefit of education, but they required their children to stay at home and help on the farm and certain periods to not go to school. And John would literally have to hide under the porch to run out to the school bus.
And he'd be bused in a rattletrap school bus to a one-room schoolhouse. At the time, it was called separate but equal. It certainly was separate, but we all knew about equal.
The high schools for blacks in this part of Alabama were called training school, and the white high schools were called high school. We had the hand-me-down books, the broken-down buses.
He had to get the education that was offered in the training school, not even in high school or junior high. Black children at that age, 40, 50 years ago, were thought only intellectually capable of learning to do manual tasks, serving in homes, and so forth.
Segregation was real. You could see it. You could see it with your naked eye. I saw it as a young child. On one side, you can see a fountain shining, marked white. On the other side, a little spigot marked colored. And so you knew where to drink and where not to drink.
Now we are reaching out for the daybreak of freedom and justice and equality.
Then he heard about a young preacher from Montgomery, heard him on the radio, read about him in the newspaper. The light that glowed from the old Lewis radio was a beacon. The voice behind the static was a new young preacher that burned with change. It seems Reverend King didn't see why a black person had to sit in the back of a bus or drink from a colored-only water fountain. So 18-year-old John Lewis boarded a Greyhound bus, a bus ride that helped change America.
I saw Martin Luther King Jr. standing behind the desk. I was so scared, so frightened. I didn't know what I was going to say to Martin Luther King Jr. This man had emerged as my hero, my leader, someone that I admired. And I was really scared to be in his presence. So he spoke up and said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" Then I responded by saying, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." I gave my whole name. I didn't want there to be any mistake that I was the right person. And that was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of my involvement in the civil rights movement.
Something clicked in the young John Lewis. Freedom was a possible dream. From Pike County, from the family farm, from this meeting came John Lewis, a new breed of American hero. Heroes that were willing to fight and die for freedom. It was time to move to the front of the bus, go to a better school, to eat at any lunch counter.
And we'd be sitting there at a lunch counter, orderly, not saying a word, and someone would come up and put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs, pull us off the lunch counter stool, start beating us, and then we would be charged with disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, and we were being very orderly, very peaceful.
But African Americans soon could use the lunch counter, and the movie houses were integrated. And again, John Lewis paid a price. 40 times he was jailed, and 40 times he emerged from jail to continue the fight for freedom.
I felt liberated. I felt free. I felt in the real sense that I had crossed over. I had been told over and over again by my parents and grandparents, don't get in trouble. But I got in trouble. It was good trouble. It was necessary trouble.
Violence stalked the freedom riders in Alabama, first in Anniston, then Birmingham, Montgomery. Blood was shed. A great price was paid. Then, September 1963, 4 little girls died in the bosom of their church.
The bombing of the church in Birmingham on Sunday morning during Sunday school that took the life of these 4 young girls was a very dark and sad period in the history of the movement. It literally tore out the very essence of your heart. We made a decision to intensify our efforts for the right to vote because of what happened in Birmingham on that awful Sunday morning.
Out of blood, out of death, out of great courage, freedom happened. Rule of law happened. The bus stations were desegregated. The struggle shaped up in new places. There was one more bridge to cross before legislation was demanded, and that bridge was in Selma, Alabama. This sleepy southern bastion of segregation would become the gate through which freedom would march, if freedom could get through the dogs and clubs and horses and blue shirts. The freedom marchers needed a man of courage. They turned to John Lewis to lead them on what became shamefully known as Bloody Sunday.
We came to the apex of the bridge, and down below we saw a sea of blue. Alabama state troopers. We continued to walk, and we come to that point within hearing distance of the state troopers. And a man identified himself and said, I am Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march and it will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse and return to your church. In less than a minute and a half, Major Cloud said, troopers advance. And you saw these men putting on their gas masks. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bullwhips, trampling us with horses, releasing their tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick and had a concussion at the bridge. That day, I felt like it was the last protest. I felt like I was going to die. I thought I saw death. But Bloody Sunday was a turning point in the history of the civil rights movement.
The march from Selma to Montgomery yanked at the nation's consciousness. America wept in shame, and the Voting Rights Act was passed. The South began its transformation.
We have witnessed a transformation of not just Southern politics, but American politics because of what happened in Selma on Bloody Sunday. You have hundreds and thousands of black elected officials. Even in a little town like Selma, there's a biracial city government. The city council was biracial. There's elected black judges. The fire chief, the police chief happened to be black. But there are more black elected officials in the state of Mississippi today than in any state. I think in 1965, there was probably less than 100. Today, there are almost 9,000 black elected officials in 11 southern states.
That revolution swept John Lewis into the Atlanta City Council. Finally, this son of a sharecropper won election in the United States House of Representatives. But it wasn't an easy journey. John Lewis had become democracy's missionary for Americans. One man, one vote, equal opportunity, humanity. He changed America forever. And nothing symbolized that change better than that same bridge at Selma. Only this time, in 2000, the President of the United States marched proudly across to proclaim to the world that a few brave men, women, and children had indeed changed us forever.
And thank you, John Lewis, for the beatings you took and the heart you kept wide open. Thank you for walking with the wind, hand in hand with your brothers and sisters, to hold America's trembling house down. Thank you for your vision of the beloved community, an America at peace with itself. I tell you all, as long as Americans are willing to hold hands, we can walk with any wind, we can cross any bridge. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome.
Let me tell you a little story about when I was growing up outside of Troy, Alabama. I had an aunt by the name of Seneva, and Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. Sometimes when it would rain, she would take a bucket, a pail, or a tub to catch the rainwater. At night, sometime you can look up through the ceiling of the house, through the tin roof, and count the stars. Well, on this particular Saturday afternoon, we were out playing in her dirt yard, and an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing. And she suggested that we all should get inside of her old shotgun house. She suggested that we all should hold hands. The wind continued to blow, the thunder continued to roll, the lightning continued to flash, and the rain continued to beat on this old house. Ma became terrified. She started crying, and all of us, young children, we started crying. We thought this old house was going to blow away. And when one corner of this old house appeared to be lifted from its foundation, we would walk to that corner, trying to hold this house down with our little bodies. When the other corner appeared to be lifted, we would walk to that corner, trying to hold this house down with our little bodies. We were little children walking with the wind. We never left the house. We must never leave the house today. We must try to hold the American house together and create one house, one family, the American house, the American family,